Hello everyone! So today we are talking about ethics and the internet, how it's implemented and used. So for this week we talked about ethics, and ethics in terms of online platforms doesn't really have an exact definition, is kind of a blurred line and can be difficult to implement. So as we know, there's a very broad range of what necessarily falls under ethics, and what it means can vary depending on the person. It's also a blurred line, so there isn't really a clear distinction between what is and isn't ethical on the internet. And rules or things that involve ethics can be very difficult to implement in terms of online platforms because an online platform isn't something that's fully regulated. So for this week we had 3 readings. We had one labeled Confronting the Challenges of Participatory Culture, another one that was based on the NPR Ethics Handbook, and the last one was an article by USA Today. So for the first reading, it discussed inequalities in access to technology and mentioned 3 different gaps, which were participation, transparency, and ethical. In terms of the NPR Handbook, it was a structured list on how you can be ethical online, especially revolving around journalism, and they kind of talked about how they implement how to be ethical in terms of social media. And lastly, the USA Today article was about a student who was wrongly accused about the Boston bombings through Reddit, a social media platform, and it gives Reddit's apology to the family and the student and talks about how that played out. So for the first reading, the Confronting Challenges reading, I found it really interesting because I realized how accessibility plays a big role in how students learn. And also I kind of learned about how the participation gap in technology is pretty big, especially depending on the type of income that you're in, specifically in a household. So in the lower right corner, you'll see how internet access varies between lower and higher income people, and how there tends to be this big gap because lower income students don't necessarily get to fully understand the full access of internet and the range that it has compared to their high income counterpart students. So I thought that was really interesting. In terms of the transparency problem, it kind of assumes that the whole time that a child spends on the internet is based on them reflecting about what they looked at, when that's not really the case. Sometimes a student can just watch a video to watch a video and not really reflect on it, and so when using online platforms in that sense, it's not exactly beneficial. And then in terms of the ethics gap, it talks about how people just generally assume that youth or students are able to develop their own sense of ethics online, when that isn't really the case. In fact, they have some sort of struggle with it and need some type of barrier in place in order to actually form these ethics. For the NPR Ethics Handbook, it talks about how their form of journalism comes into play and the tips that they give regarding how to be ethical on social media, and I thought that was really cool. I didn't know that there were all these steps that they took in regards to learning about a certain topic, and even before posting something on the internet, they want to make sure that they've gone through all these 10 sections that they talk about in order to actually make their post as legit as it can be, and I thought that was really cool. I didn't know how much work went into posting an ethical article, so that was really interesting to me. And lastly, the USA Today one was really something else. I didn't know the types of repercussion that social media could have on a person, especially to this level. So it really gives insight as to how the lack of ethics plays in social media. So that's all for